Welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've got a really interesting topic today from what you sent us. Chapters on human impact on the environment.
Lots to unpack there.
Yeah, and specifically from Chapter 5, the environmental impact of human activity. So today we're going to zero in even closer on sections 5.1, 5.2, and 5.3.
Yeah.
Really try to get at this connection between industrialization, technology, and urbanization.
Yeah.
I think we're in for some pretty big aha moments as we go through this.
Absolutely. It's incredible to think how these three forces have really shaped the world as we know it today, for better or worse, right?
Mm-hmm.
Often with unintended consequences that kind of ripple out across generations and ecosystems.
Yeah, well, let's start with, I guess, the first one chronologically, right? The Industrial Revolution.
Right.
Such a period of radical change. And I think we all remember, those images of coal-powered factories and just belching out smoke. But your chapter mentioned something that I think is pretty startling. The thick smog in London during that time wasn't just unpleasant. It actually led to thousands of deaths.
Yeah.
And that's just a really sobering reminder of the hidden costs of progress, isn't it?
Absolutely. And what's so striking is how that era really laid the groundwork for so many of the environmental challenges that we're dealing with today.
Right.
The reliance on fossil fuels, the rise of these megacities that we see, the demand for resources, it just never ends. And it's a chain reaction that's been going on for centuries at this point.
Right. So it's not just a historical thing. It's about understanding where we are now in the present.
Yeah.
And your chapter, section 5.1 specifically, really does a deep dive into the specifics of that impact from industrialization. So can you walk us through some of the key takeaways?
Yeah, sure. One of the most significant consequences of industrialization was deforestation. And it makes sense, right, when you think about how much wood would have been needed to fuel those early factories and all the construction going on as cities were expanding at an unprecedented rate. But this large-scale deforestation didn't just remove trees, it completely disrupted entire ecosystems. And the impact of that is huge. Biodiversity, soil health, all sorts of things are affected.
It makes sense. It's kind of like a domino effect as
Right.
one action leads to another.
Right.
But your chapter also points to the role of technology in all this.
Uh-huh.
And if I remember correctly, it's section 5.2.
Yes.
And it kind of acts as both a driver and a potential solution
Right.
to these environmental challenges.
Exactly. It's this really interesting duality. On the one hand, technology allows us to produce and consume on a massive scale, which accelerates resource depletion and pollution.
Right.
But on the other hand, it also offers us a path towards cleaner energy, more efficient processes, and innovative ways to lessen our impact.
It's fascinating, the duality. It's like we're holding this tool that can either be used to build or to destroy, depending on how we decide to use it.
Yeah.
So can you give us a concrete example of that push and pull, I guess, from the Industrial Revolution with technology?
Sure. The invention of the steam engine
Okay.
revolutionized transportation, manufacturing, all of that. But it also dramatically increased our reliance on coal, which, as we discussed earlier, led to these unprecedented levels of air pollution. The London fog is a perfect example of that.
Yeah. So even back then, people were grappling with this double-edged sword of technology.
For sure.
But let's shift gears a bit and talk about another major theme in your chapter, which is urbanization.
Okay.
And section 5.3 paints a very vivid picture of how cities impact the environment.
They do. Urbanization is a fascinating phenomenon. As these cities grow, they consume the surrounding land, often at the expense of natural habitats.
Right.
And this loss of habitat can lead to a decline in biodiversity, which in turn disrupts the delicate balance of these ecosystems.
Yeah, it's almost like we're paving paradise to put up a parking lot, as the song goes.
Right.
But your chapter also mentions that cities can be hotbeds of innovation and sustainability.
They can.
How do we reconcile those two seemingly contradictory aspects of urban life?
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Cities are inherently resource-intensive, but they also concentrate human ingenuity and creativity. So the challenge is to figure out how to harness that potential to design cities that are not just efficient, but also regenerative. Cities that work with nature, not against it.
Can you give us an example of what a more regenerative city might look like? Something maybe our listeners can kind of picture.
Sure. Think about rooftop gardens and vertical farms that bring nature back into these concrete jungles. Imagine buildings that are designed to maximize natural light and ventilation so that we reduce our reliance on these artificial systems. Efficient public transportation networks that incentivize walking and cycling over car use.
Right. So it's a blend of of smart design, but also kind of a shift in our lifestyles and our urban lifestyles.
Yeah.
But I'm curious about the existing challenges. Cities that weren't built with sustainability in mind.
Right.
Places that are already dealing with pollution and habitat loss. How do we deal with that?
Well, that's where innovation comes in. We need to find ways to retrofit existing infrastructure,
Okay.
incorporate green spaces into these dense urban areas, implement stricter emission standards, and invest in renewable energy sources.
So it's recognizing that we can't just abandon our cities. We have to find ways to make them work better
Exactly.
for both people and the planet. Sounds like a balancing act.
It is. It requires a multifaceted approach. We need to consider not just the environmental impact of cities, but also the social and economic dimensions as well. We need to make sure that urban development is equitable and inclusive, that everyone benefits from a healthy and thriving urban environment.
Okay, I'm starting to see how all these threads are connected. Industrialization, technology, urbanization. It's not just these isolated phenomena. They're intertwined forces shaping the world that we live in.
Absolutely. And understanding these connections is crucial for navigating the complex challenges and opportunities that we face in the 21st century. We need to move beyond these simplistic solutions and embrace a more holistic approach that recognizes the interconnectedness of everything.
And welcome back to the Deep Dive. We've been talking about how industrialization, technology, and urbanization have all kind of shaped our environmental landscape,
Yeah.
often with, like we said before, a lot of unintended consequences.
And you used that term earlier, unintended consequences, and it really stuck with me because it does seem like a lot of the environmental challenges we're facing today stem from, well-intentioned actions that had ripple effects that we just didn't foresee.
It's true. Take the Industrial Revolution, for example. Incredible advancements, right? But it also set in motion a pattern of resource extraction and pollution that we're still grappling with today.
Yeah.
And your chapter, it really emphasizes that point. It doesn't shy away from any of those complexities. And in section 5.2, when you're talking about technology's role, you used this phrase that I found fascinating, the paradox of progress. What does that mean in this context?
It refers to the idea that technological advancements, while obviously aimed at improving our lives, can often create new problems or even exacerbate existing ones. And we see this time and time again. Certain technologies, while offering solutions, can also contribute to environmental harm.
So it's not about demonizing technology, right?
Yeah.
It's about understanding that it has a nuanced impact.
Exactly. Look at agriculture, for instance, the Green Revolution. All these advancements in fertilizers and pesticides led to a huge increase in food production, crucial for feeding a growing population.
Yeah.
But it also led to widespread pesticide resistance, soil degradation, and water pollution.
Right. We solve one problem and we create a whole new set.
Exactly. The takeaway here is that technological innovation needs to be guided by a deep understanding of ecological principles. We have to think long term. What are the potential consequences of this new technology? How will it affect the environment, not just today, but for future generations?
Right. We need to shift our mindset from these short-term gains to thinking about long-term sustainability.
Absolutely. We need to be thinking about the legacy we're leaving behind. Which brings us back to urbanization.
Yeah.
As cities continue to grow, how do we make sure that they're not just efficient, but also sustainable, livable?
And in section 5.3, you talk about this, and you make a really compelling case for rethinking our approach to urban design. And you use this analogy of a city as a living organism.
Uh-huh.
Can you elaborate on that for us?
Well, think of a city as this complex ecosystem, right? With all these interconnected systems, transportation, energy, waste management, water supply. Just like in nature, these systems need to be in balance if they're going to function properly. We need to move away from these linear models of resource consumption and embrace more circular systems, ones that mimic the natural world.
Okay, so instead of this take-make-waste approach that we've been using, we need a more cyclical model where resources are reused and regenerated.
Exactly. Imagine a city where waste is treated as a valuable resource, where buildings are designed to conserve energy and water, where transportation systems prioritize walking, cycling, public transit.
Sounds utopian, but is it achievable?
It is, but it requires a shift in our mindset. A willingness to challenge conventional thinking, and a commitment to collaboration. We need architects, urban planners, policymakers, citizens, all working together towards a shared vision.
Which brings up another point from your chapter, which is community engagement.
Yes.
You argue that real change happens from the ground up.
It does, and we see this happening all over the world. Community gardens are transforming these vacant lots into vibrant green spaces. Neighborhood groups are advocating for bike lanes, pedestrian-friendly streets. Cities are experimenting with green roofs, urban forestry to mitigate that urban heat island effect.
It sounds like people are taking ownership of their urban environment.
They are, and that's what's so important. When citizens are actively involved in shaping their communities, it creates a sense of responsibility and empowers them to be agents of change.
So it's not just about these top-down solutions.
Right.
It's about these grassroots movements that drive change from the bottom up.
Exactly. And these local initiatives often have a ripple effect that inspires others and builds momentum.
This conversation is giving me a lot to think about.
Yeah.
It seems like there's this growing awareness of the interconnectedness of everything and the need for more sustainable practices.
Definitely.
But what do you think are some of the biggest obstacles to achieving this kind of transformative change that we're talking about?
I think one of the biggest hurdles is overcoming the inertia of the status quo. We get so used to doing things a certain way that it can be hard to even envision alternative models.
It's like we're stuck in a rut, even when we know that there might be a better way.
Exactly. And then you have the short-term focus of a lot of political and economic systems. It can be challenging to implement long-term solutions when immediate concerns often take priority.
That age-old tension between short-term gains and long-term sustainability.
Exactly. And then you have the issue of equity and access. We have to make sure that this transition to a more sustainable future is a just and equitable one, that it benefits everybody, not just a select few.
Right. So it's not just about environmental sustainability, it's about social justice as well.
Absolutely. You can't address one without the other.
This deep dive has been really, really eye-opening.
Good.
We've explored the interplay of industrialization, technology, urbanization, the challenges, the opportunities.
It's a lot to take in.
It is. What are your thoughts on how we move forward? How do we translate all this knowledge into action?
I think we need to cultivate a sense of agency, both individually and collectively.
Okay.
We need to recognize that we have the power to shape the future. Our choices matter, our actions matter,
Yeah.
and we can make a difference.
Yeah.
We also need to embrace collaboration. We can achieve so much more when we work together.
I love that. A sense of agency and a spirit of collaboration.
Yeah.
Because it does feel like we're at a turning point, right?
Well, yeah.
A time of great challenge, but also great opportunity. And your chapter really does underscore that. It doesn't shy away from those complexities, but it also offers this sense of hope, this belief that we can create a better future if we work together.
Exactly. We need to harness our ingenuity, our creativity, our compassion to build a world that's not just sustainable, but also just equitable and thriving for everyone.
Welcome back to The Deep Dive. We've been talking about some pretty heavy stuff.
We have.
Industrialization, technology, urbanization, and their impact on the environment. But, going through your chapter and realizing it's not all doom and gloom.
No, not at all.
There's actually, your chapter ends on a hopeful note, emphasizing the power of collective action.
That's right. It's easy to get overwhelmed when you look at the scale of these global challenges, but the reality is that solutions often come from the ground up,
Right.
from communities taking action and inspiring change.
It makes sense, right? I mean, we all live in communities. We
do.
It's where we experience the environment most directly. So it seems logical that that's where a lot of the positive changes would begin.
Absolutely. Think of communities as these testing grounds for sustainability.
Okay.
They can try new ideas, implement local solutions, and really demonstrate what's possible, even on a smaller scale.
I like that analogy. So what are some concrete examples of these community-led initiatives that are making a difference?
Well, one example that comes to mind is the Transition Town movement. It's a global network of communities that are actively working to reduce their reliance on fossil fuels and build more resilience in the face of climate change.
Okay.
They're focusing on things like creating local food systems, investing in renewable energy projects, promoting sustainable transportation options.
So they're really taking the future into their own hands.
Yes.
Not waiting for someone else to fix things for them.
Exactly. And what's so inspiring is that these initiatives are driven by this incredible sense of shared purpose and a real connection to their local environment.
Yeah, it's like that saying, think globally, act locally.
Exactly.
But how do these local actions then connect to the bigger picture, to global change?
Well, it's all about the ripple effect. When one community shows that something works, that a solution is effective, it can inspire others to adopt similar practices.
Okay.
And those successes can then influence policy decisions at a higher level,
Yeah.
creating this cascade of positive change.
So it's like a bottom-up approach to sustainability.
Right.
Where these individual actions create momentum for broader change. But I think a lot of people might feel like their efforts are just too small to make a real difference. What would you say to someone who's feeling that sense of powerlessness?
I would say never underestimate the power of your choices.
Okay.
Every time you choose to walk or bike instead of driving, every time you buy local produce, every time you support a sustainable business, you're casting a vote for the world you want to live in.
It's like we're collectively shaping the market with our decisions.
Exactly. And those choices have a ripple effect. They influence others, and they send a message to businesses and policymakers that sustainability matters.
So it's not just about individual actions. It's about that collective impact.
Absolutely. When enough people make conscious choices, it creates a shift in demand that can't be ignored.
Well, this deep dive has really been eye-opening.
Right.
We started by talking about, the impact of human activity on the environment.
Right.
But we uncovered a lot of hope, a lot of action out there.
It's a complex story,
It is.
constantly evolving. Yeah.
But one thing's for sure, we have the power to write a better ending. And it starts with understanding the challenges, embracing solutions, and most importantly, working together.
Beautifully said. So for our listeners out there who are feeling inspired and want to get involved, what advice would you give them? What's that first step?
Connect with your community. Find out what's already happening in your area and get involved. Volunteer your time, share your skills, use your voice. Every action, big or small, contributes to the movement.
That's a great call to action. And you know what? It perfectly captures the spirit of this deep dive.
It does.
It's about understanding that we're all interconnected, taking responsibility, and working together to create a more sustainable world.
A better future.
A better future. Thank you for joining us on this journey. Until next time, keep diving deeper.